Today on Up Front, the race for state Supreme Court heads into the home stretch. Next, two perspectives on the candidates, the race and its tone. My guests are Democratic State Representative Chris Taylor and Rick Essenberg of the conservative Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Then, what's at stake in Wisconsin's upcoming presidential primary? Milwaukee Journal Sentinel political reporter Craig Gilbert on the candidates and the consequences. And the Milwaukee Bucks reveal the look of the new downtown arena. Bucks President Peter Feigin on the design and timeline.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. We're a little more than 2 weeks away now from the April 5th election, and some of the worst fears about the race for state Supreme Court have already been realized. Sensational headlines, third-party ads that had to be changed or taken off the air in some markets, and partisan-sounding themes in a supposedly nonpartisan race. The candidates, incumbent Justice Rebecca Bradley and appeals court judge Joanne Kloppenburg, sat down with me for a debate at Marquette University Law School last Tuesday night and seen statewide on the Upfront Network. They held a second debate Friday night in Madison. We're talking more about this race and how we elect our justices with Democratic State Representative Chris Taylor of Madison and Rick Essenberg, president of the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Both are attorneys, and we thank both of you for being with us today. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
So give me your sense. We're about 2 weeks out from this election. Give me your sense of what's going to decide this race. I'll begin with you, Representative Taylor, and then bring you into the conversation.
Well, I think the last 2 weeks have really shown that Rebecca Bradley is unfit to serve on our state's highest court. She has espoused a whole history of very biased, hateful beliefs. She has not specifically disavowed these beliefs, and it really calls into question whether this is the type of conduct, whether these are the types of beliefs that we want justices to have who sit on our highest court. And I think she has shown that this is initially a very partisan appointment by Governor Walker. I think that Professor Essenberg has recognized that in some of his letters that he sent in support of Rebecca Bradley, that she would get support of conservatives, and that's what we're seeing right now, these big money special interests, Scott Walker's friends coming in to try to buy another seat on our state Supreme Court. And it's frankly the last thing that the people of this state want. We want a fair and independent judiciary. And I think that Rebecca Bradley has shown that she's really not that.
Well, let me bring you into this, Rick Essenberg. What do you think is going to turn this race?
I hope that what turns this race is that we finally get to what the issues in a judicial election should be. Representative Taylor is talking about some things that Justice Bradley wrote a quarter of a century ago when she was a 21-year-old college kid. Now, most of us in our personal lives, in our work lives, understand that what we are when we're a callow 21-year-old is not the same thing as what we are when we are 45. And we know that Justice Bradley is supported by several prominent members of the gay and lesbian community in the city of Milwaukee. I've been to fundraisers at their homes. We know that Justice Bradley developed a reputation for empathy and compassion when she was in children's court, approved the adoption petitions of gay and lesbian couples. And more importantly, we know that she did something that most politicians will never, ever do. It's absolutely not true that she didn't disavow the comments that she made in this column 24 years ago. She unequivocally and unreservedly apologized. And for voters who are concerned, Mike, I would suggest that they go back and they look at the debate that you hosted with Justice Bradley, where she expressed what's in her heart and what she feels today. I think her sincerity was moving and compelling. I think it's time to talk about the differences in judicial philosophies between these two women, because they reflect a debate that's been going on among lawyers for 35 years. It's a real and substantive debate.
Representative Taylor, do you think the discussion of philosophy has been overshadowed by the other part of this race?
Well, I think that these very hateful beliefs that Rebecca Bradley has espoused does get to her philosophy. It gets to her character, it gets to her judgment, and she has not disavowed comments blaming rape victims for being raped. She has not disavowed comments that somehow taking contraception is the equivalent of murder. So she has some very, very extreme comments. She has an article that came out in 2006 saying that pharmacists should have the constitutional right to refuse to dispense birth control to women, and she equates taking birth control with basically murder. These are very, very extreme beliefs. She is not disavowed. I've been tweeting at her for 10 days asking her to apologize to rape victims. She has refused to do that. She has a noted homophobe on some of her campaign on a radio address, and that's David Clark, who said once the marriage equality decision came down that we should revolt against this, there should be a revolution. So she, you know, I would think she would be a little more cognizant of not having a noted homophobe on these ads. So she says that her views have changed, that she's evolved. She apologized for offending people, but even my 5-year-old child would know that these comments are hateful, they serve no purpose but to discriminate. That's not the kind of person that we want on our state Supreme Court.
Let me bring in Professor Essenberg. You want to respond to parts of that or all of it? Or what?
There's a bait and switch going on here. It's legitimate to ask whether Justice Bradley can be fair. She's demonstrated that in her service at Children's Court, and I think that she's spoken to the issue. It is not the same thing to then shift into what is somebody's position on same-sex marriage. I don't know what her position on same-sex marriage is. I do know that President Obama and Hillary Clinton were against it until quite recently, and I don't think that Representative Taylor would suggest that that means that they're homophobes or bigots. But more importantly than that, this is an attempt to make a judicial race now about political positions. And that's not what it's about. It's about judicial philosophy. And judicial philosophy, if we can ever get to talking about that, I think is a quite different thing. In a sense, it doesn't matter what Justice Bradley's positions are on a variety of social issues, because as a judge, she has to follow the law. So, for example, if we want to use same-sex marriage as an example, the United States Supreme Court has spoken to that issue. Now, I might disagree with its reasoning. Justice Bradley might disagree with its reasoning. I don't know. I haven't asked her. But either one of us, if we were on the court, would have to apply it, and I know that she will. So I think that we have to talk about, and it's a shame that we don't, about the differing judicial philosophies that these two women have.
I think we tried to do that on Tuesday night, but hopefully we were successful to some degree.
I'd like to try here.
And let's, but I want to kind of bring things full circle here. I mean, as I said in the lead-in, there have been some pretty personal headlines. There have been, there's a lot of focus on words that were said some time ago. There's these third-party ads, which have been pretty controversial. The question I asked of both candidates, I don't think we really got an answer on it, but the question I asked is this any way to run an airline? Should we be doing selecting of our justices differently in Wisconsin? Do we begin to look at bipartisan commissions that appoint rather than go through this process, which frankly ends up being pretty ugly just about every time we have one of these elections? I'll begin with you, Rick Essenberg.
You know, I always say I'm agnostic on judicial elections because on the one hand, I think that we descend into debates like this, which I don't think really reflect the differences between the two candidates. I think that these are two fine women who disagree about the law, and we talk about everything but that. On the other hand, the same thing happens sometimes when we have Senate confirmation hearings about candidates for the Supreme Court. The bottom line, though, is that we elect judges in the state of Wisconsin. We're not going to stop electing judges in the state of Wisconsin. And so I think the people of the state have to ask themselves, do you want a textualist and originalist in the tradition of the late Justice Antonin Scalia? If you do, then I think you need to vote for Justice Bradley. Judge Kloppenburg has said that her model is Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Both of them are very, very bright jurists, but they're people who believe that we ought to have a living constitution, that we ought to change the meaning of the law, if necessary, to reflect a left progressive view of the world. If that's what you want in a judge, then I suppose Judge Kloppenburg would be your choice.
Representative, I'll give you the final word on this. Should we have elections? Should we have appointments? Where should we go?
Yeah, no, I think we need change, obviously. I mean, I think you could do a couple different things. You could look at a bipartisan commission to appoint, but you know, you could also say, let's publicly finance these campaigns and let's require more disclosures from these shadowy, dark money groups who, you know, we would like to see more accountability and transparency And the public has a right to know who these groups are and what they're doing. That's a position that Professor Essenberg doesn't support. He doesn't support more disclosure, and I doubt that Rebecca Bradley does either.
I'm in favor of transparency and disclosure. I'd love to know who One Wisconsin Now's donors are. We tried to publicly finance campaigns. What we found out is that it doesn't work because you can't raise enough money to run a statewide race, and because constitutionally you can't restrict what independent parties do when they're exercising their First Amendment rights, you wind up having the campaigns hijacked by people other than the candidates.
Let me wrap things up there. I want to thank both of you for your time. Rick Essenberg, Chris Taylor, thank you very much for being with us today. Appreciate it. The road to the White House is coming right through Wisconsin. Next, one of the state's top political reporters on the campaigns looking to make a play here on April 5th. And later, what the new home of the Milwaukee Bucks will look like. The team's president brings us up to date on the arena project. That's when Upfront continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.